Ahoy there folks, I'm Captain Benzie and welcome back to another video for EVE Online. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at one of my absolute favourite frigates in the game, the Minmatar Republic's Tech 2 assault frigate, the Jaguar. Now the Jaguar is Minmatar, it's a frigate, it's an assault ship, it uses missiles, and it's fuck a tribe. It's basically every single box that I enjoy about EVE ticked all in one vessel. Of course, this was going to be pretty high on the list. Now whilst I'm going to be showcasing a fit that I use on this mainly for Abyssal dead spaces, we are going to talk about some of the other types of content that it can consume as well in regards to PvE. Obviously this is a very popular PvP ship, as are many of the assault frigates, and we will probably touch in that more on a future video. If you do enjoy this video, let me know, hit like on it, drop a subscription to the channel, and drop a comment down below as well. Commenting and liking really helps the channel out, it helps YouTube know that people are enjoying my content, and thus to recommend it to more people. It's a free and easy way to help support me in everything that I do. If you do want to go the extra mile to help support me financially, however, and help keep me making content like this, you can do so by heading into the description of this video and checking out my Patreon page, my PayPal tip jar, and my Redbubble merchandise store. Finally, if you are new to EVE Online and you're looking to find your footing in the game, first of all, come join the Catskull Community Discord, linked in the very same description down below. Bunch of really friendly folk there who love to talk about all things EVE Online and a lot more besides. We'd love to have you there and help you out in any way we can. Also, if you haven't already used a referral link, mine is in the description down below. Click on that, log in with your EVE account, and the game will give you 1 million free skill points. I also get a small kickback if you do that, so thank you ever so much. That all said and done then, let's jump right into talking about the Minmatar's Tech 2 assault frigate, the Jaguar. As many of you know, assault ships are some of my favourite in the game. I just really enjoy the playstyle of both the assault frigates and the heavy assault cruisers. Obviously today we're talking about the Jaguar, which is one of the two Minmatar Tech 2 assault frigates. Let's have a look at its bonuses, and we're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. First of all, we have the typical assault frigate roll bonuses. All of them have these capabilities. First of all, a 50% reduction in warp drive signature radius penalty. This means that when you activate a micro warp drive on a Jaguar or any of the assault frigates, whereas it would increase your signature radius by a certain amount for having a micro warp drive active, the amount that it would increase your signature radius is halved. So instead of a 500% boost to signature radius, it's only going to be a 250% boost to signature radius, which is a massive distance and actually allows things like the Jaguar to essentially speed tank whilst using a micro warp drive, because the speed increase now massively outcompensates the penalty in signature radius increase. It's a really cool little ability that is unique to the assault frigates for the most part and makes them incredibly fast and potent vessels, although we're not actually going to be using a micro warp drive, but we'll discuss that later. We also have the ability to fit assault damage controls. Again, we're not actually going to be using that in this particular fit, but basically to explain what an assault damage control is for the uninitiated, it is a special low slot module that passively increases both your hull, armor, and shield damage resistances by the amount shown here. Less than a standard damage control unit perhaps. They are exclusive to assault frigates and heavy assault cruisers, but what they do is give you this really cool panic button. Essentially, when you start taking big amounts of damage, you can activate the assault damage control for a humongous boost to those resistances. This lasts for around about 9 seconds, 8.78 to be precise, and does have a very long cooldown of 150 seconds. Use this as a panic button, and oh crap, I'm taking too much damage, pop that, and for the next 8 to 9 seconds, you're going to take practically nothing. Learning the timing of that is absolutely vital if you're going to use it. Again, we're not using it in this fit though, so let's not stress too much. Minmatar Frigate. We're going to have Minmatar Frigate trained up to 5 to be able to undock the Jaguar. This is an absolute basic requirement. It is non-negotiable, so we're going to talk about this as if it's maxed. Having Minmatar Frigate 5 is going to give you 25% bonus to light missile and rocket launcher rate of fire, so those missiles and rockets are going to be launching even faster, better cycle times. Doesn't affect your capacitor because, well, yep, missiles don't. And having light missiles and rockets are great options. Obviously some ships do only apply to light missiles or to rockets. This gives you the option of both. We then get a 37.5% bonus to shield booster amount. This does pretty much lock the Jaguar into being a shield tank vessel, but with a slot layout that has 5 mid slots and only 3 lows, that's pretty much by design anyway. So shield boosters are very much what we're going to be looking at in regards to tanking this vessel. That said, again, it is small, it is fast, it's also going to be signature tanking really well. That shield booster is just to repair any incidental damage that you do take. Finally then, we have the Assault Frigate skill. For the purposes of this video, I'm running this at full level 5 because, again, I love my assault ships, so absolutely that is a skill I have maxed out. This gives us a 5% bonus per level, so 25% at full training, to light missile and rocket explosion velocity, meaning they apply better to faster moving targets, and a 5 to 25% bonus to light missile and rocket damage. The fact that this attacks the DPS equation from both sides is really, really potent. 25% increased rocket damage alongside 25% increased rocket rate of fire, for example, means you're getting more damage per shot and more shots in the same amount of time. It's a really powerful way just to make sure that whatever fittings you're using are going to benefit that to the absolute maximum. Speaking of fittings, let's talk about the fit that I'm using on this particular version of the ship. This is for running both dark Abyssal dead spaces and for running C1 combat sites in wormholes. This will do those really quite comfortably. If you do happen to have a Wolf Rye, this will actually run C3s. Even though you're not armor tanked, you can do surprisingly well with it because your tiny diminutive signature radius means you barely take any hits at all, and your DPS just goes through the absolute roof in those sites, especially C13s as well, allowing the Jaguar to be a very potent threat in those scenarios. Not perhaps the best option, but definitely a strong option. Now again, we've got a slot layout of 4 high slots, 3 of which are launchers, 5 mid slots, which suggests shield tanking, compared to only 3 low slots. If you were to try and armor tank this, obviously ignoring its traits and bonuses, you've only got 3 slots to play with. So we are going to be shield tanking this. We are of course going to be using missiles because of the 3 launcher hardpoints. You can put a turret in here, but let's talk about that in a second. And then we've got 2 rig slots. So starting off with the high slots then, the launchers I've gone for are just rocket launcher 2s. We want a good amount of damage to be coming off this ship. You'll see here with Mjolnir Rage Rockets, we are getting a whopping 185.6 DPS out of this vessel, and that's with a pretty decent range of 11 kilometers. Obviously, you can increase that by using things like the Javelins, but I think this is a small and fast enough ship that it can keep range with pretty much everything that it needs to. Strong damage from those, and being missiles gives full damage application as well. If you're going up against something with kinetic weakness, then you use Scourge. If you're going up against explosive weakness, you use the Nova, Mjolnir for EMP weakness, and of course Inferno for thermal weakness. You can go for light missiles. I just think the rockets really work with the Jaguar. It's fast enough and small enough that it can keep that range and keep punching things in the face. Now, the 4th slot, I've gone for a utility with a small Ghoul compact energy Nosferatu. That's because we are going to be shield tanking, and shield tanking does kind of chew your capacitor a fair amount. You'll notice we are cap stable. Obviously, that is with this running, but even with it off, we are still capacitor stable. The difference is, without it on, we're only 1.7 gigajoules of delta. That is very easy to neutralize. A single neutralizer is going to put you into the red and make you completely capacitor unstable. So we are going to have this running, much more respectable 5.3 gigajoules per second. That's going to help us maintain capacitor stability much more effectively. You can theoretically swap this for a turret if you wanted. If you're a Minmatar pilot like me, you probably have projectile turret skills fairly high. Autocannons work really well in this as well for that slot, just to give you that extra boost of damage, but I personally prefer the capacitor stability. For the mid slots here, I should also have changed that to the shield boost rate. For the mid slots, we're going to be shield tanking, active shield tanking, so a small shield booster 2. Let's keep it nice and cheap and simple here, just to repair that. Down here, we also have a thermal shield amplifier. Our biggest resistance hole is essentially our thermals. If we're going to darks, that can be a problem for us, which is why I've plugged that one. You can ultimately, if I were just to turn that off, you'll see here, we can drop that down to 60%, 40% there will be on kinetic. If you're using this mainly for sea ratting, like wormhole ratting, I would use a kinetic one or even a multi-spectrum here. But for the dark Abyssal dead spaces, we want that thermal resistance up higher, so I've gone for that there. But again, just swap it to a multi-spectrum or to a kinetic if you're running the wormhole sites. Then we have capacitor stability in the form of a Eutectic compact capacitor recharger and a small compact lead acid cap battery. I normally would want to go a bit higher on these, but we just don't quite have the fitting requirements to go for something like a Republic fleet or a Thukka, so going for the compact versions just allows those to fit in that little bit easier without having to go quite so heavily into fitting skills. Finally, for the mid-slots propulsion, 1 meganewton YS8 compact Afterburner. Yes, we have bonuses to micro warp drives, and in a PvP situation, I would absolutely be using a micro warp drive on this vessel. But for PvE, especially any environment that has neutralization, the second that I fit a micro warp drive there, we lose 25% or 20%, depending on the micro warp drive, of our maximum capacitor capacity, which is going to push us into capacitor instability no matter what we do. So we are stuck using an Afterburner for propulsion. That said, 1058 meters per second is not bad at all, especially if we were to have a look at our signature radius there of 34 meters. Very small, very fast moving ship. Not the fastest assault frigate by a long shot, but good enough. For our low slots then, because we're not armor tanking, we can go straight on damage and application here. This gives us a missile guidance enhancer and 2 ballistic control systems. Here again, I've gone compact because we've only got limited CPU to work with here with the standard missile guidance enhancer. This is just going to help you get that little bit extra range, little bit extra application alongside additional damage from those two. You could theoretically use Polybnos, but for the most part, I just prefer the setup here. I think it works out better overall and keeps it nice and cheap. For our rig slots, finally to round things out, small hydraulic bay thrusters 2 and a small Warhead Calefaction catalyst 1. This, it just gives us that a little bit of extra range alongside a bit of extra hitting power. You could theoretically swap this out for something like bay loading accelerators to get a bit more damage out of this, but again, I find the range just helps that little bit more. Anyway, that is the fit in general. As I said, this is designed to run Tech 1 Darks, and it will do those really quite comfortably. You can head out into C1, C2 or C3, depending if it's a Wolf or IA or not. C1 for the most part, J-Space. I would just obviously swap out that thermal shield amplifier for either a kinetic or a multi-spectrum, just to help your survivability there a little bit more, and you'll do absolutely fine with that. If you're more of a K-Space guy though, yeah, you can go dead running with this. DED sights easily does 3s and 4s, might do a bit higher. I'll be honest, I don't run particularly many DED sights, so I can't really tell you. L2 agent missions, no problem. Sisters of Eve, Epic Arc, again, not an issue at all. I've just finished running that again, and I did it with this exact Jaguar. Again, I did swap to a multi-spectrum shield hardener for that, rather than the kinetic one, but again, it's entirely up to you. You can actually fit regarding the individual mission depending on what you want there. So if you know you're going to be going up against, for example, energy turrets or whatever, you can fit accordingly to keep your resistances at the best situation. Anyway, to showcase how we can fly this, I'm now going to take this out into a couple of T1 Dark Abyssal dead spaces, and we'll see how it flies. So I'm going to run a couple of calm, dark Abyssal dead spaces in order to showcase this. The first room we come to here, of course, we have the biocompetitive cache in a distance there, and a striking Drekavac, which is a battle cruiser which does ramping damage. It is, of course, a Troglavian vessel, so those entropic disintegrators, the more that they are targeting us, the longer that it is left targeting us, the more it spools up, the more damage it does. So what I'm going to do is we are going to approach the biocompetitive cache, we are going to blast and loot that nice and quickly, whilst getting up a good bit of traversal velocity there against the Drekavac, so we don't have to worry about that hitting us too hard, because it's using turrets, and the better our tracking, the better our sort of angular momentum against it is, the less likely it is to hit us. So with that done, I'm now setting an orbit for 1 kilometer around it. You'll see that it does very little damage on the approach because we are such a small target. Just checking its resists there so we know that which of the missiles we should be using, and we can then start launching. I'm going for thermal, in this case Inferno missiles, and you'll see that now we're just going to start punching that Drekavac whilst orbiting closely around it. Shields do not last long on Troglavian vessels, they have very low shield HP, but you can see the armor is significantly thicker. Even with resistance holes, it does take a little bit of time to chunk through. You might decide that you want to overheat at this point, you might decide you want to swap down to explosive, which is what I'm going to do here, swapping to Nova Rage Rockets. Admittedly, that does give us a rather long reload time, which chews your DPS a little bit. If you're going to swap, make sure you do it early, like, pretty much like I kind of have here. You'll see it does make a bit of a difference. It's not huge, but it adds up on each individual volley. It's one of those things that if you kind of think about it, that if you were doing, say, 10 damage per volley, and it's going to, take so long, and then suddenly you can swap to 12 damage per volley, you're going to, those 2 damage, it's not much more, but after 5 volleys, it's made a difference, and so as long as those 5 volleys is less than the reload time, it's better overall. I hope that kind of makes sense. But anyway, we're nearly through the striking Drekavac now. You can see it is just literally orbit and forget at this point. Just keep hitting. It can do nothing to us. Should probably turn the shield booster off, but I'm pretty cap stable at this point, so we don't stress it all that much. Striking Drekavac is now about to go down, so we hit activate on the gate. We reload our weapons, which you can do with Control and R as well as a default key binding, just to do things a little bit faster. Beautiful Triglavian explosion. I do love the red clouds that those explode with. And off we go then into room number 2, and hopefully it could be something a little bit more scary than what we're up against there. Drekavac, no problems whatsoever. So here we go. Room number 2 of this calm, dark, abyssal dead space. What do we have? Biocompetitive loot cache, again, we are going to approach that. We are then a load of Lucifer, so we've got an angel room here. So Lucifer Echo, Lucifer Medusa, which has sensor dampeners. There we are, let's just double check. It is explosive, which is going to be the best thing to go up against these. Cool, no trouble. We're just going to launch against those. And we've got a Lucifer Fury as well. These really shouldn't give us too much of a problem. They are quite fast, which means when you've got shorter range rockets like I have, you often get a situation where when the rocket is launched, they're at 5 kilometers, but they're moving away from you, which means the rocket actually ends up going out of its own range, because the distance they were at when you launched is not where they're at when the rocket actually reaches that point because of travel times. So you may find that's why the Lucifer Echo there was in my rocket range, but it wasn't actually taking any damage at all for a while, because it wasn't orbiting, it was actually moving past me and away, so by time the rockets had travelled 10 kilometers, the Lucifer Echo had actually moved beyond that original 10 kilometers point from where it had started, thus the rockets don't reach. Here you can see, though, that Medusa goes down nice and quickly as well. No real issues going on. Okay, with the Fury, I was trying to think what the Fury does. It's a neutralizer. Not too much of a problem. You can see it is affecting our capacitor, but I think it's going to go down long before we need to stress that. And the lower my capacitor goes, the more likely it is for my Nosferatu to actually be able to kick in. Remember, you cannot neutralize an NPC. They can neutralize you, but you can use a Nosferatu. Essentially, an enemy's capacitor is always locked at a certain percentage. It never goes down, it never goes up, it stays at that percentage. The Nosferatu only works if your capacitor is lower than that percentage of the enemy. So having the Nosferatu there does help. You may not always see it instantly, but it does help. Cool, there's our resist profiles here. We're looking at a Tesella room, lots of rogue drones. This can be a fun room. I've had a couple of these doing this run, where I ended up with a couple of the towers that actually damage rogue drones, and it's like, cool, you're just going to blast through that. So same procedure as before, approach the biocompetitive cache, blast it as we approach, loot it as quickly as we can so that we can then just worry about everything else. Grab the loot. There we are, and now we're just going to approach and orbit each of these Tesellas at 1 kilometer. You'll find that, again, we take very little damage from these guys. It's a bit more than you might do from some of the other ships in here because they are smaller, they have better tracking, they are able to hit you. But you can see they go down really quite quickly, and with the shield booster running, we're not exactly cap stable, but, well, okay, we are cap stable, we're doing pretty well with that, but we're just going to be, essentially, we're going to be DPS tanking, which is an unusual concept perhaps to some people. The concept there is that you're taking so much damage because there are 8 enemies on you, so if you shoot 4 of them, you've halved your incoming damage, thus, increasing your survivability. That is DPS tanking, and that's kind of what you have to do in situations like this room, where there's a lot of stuff going on. As you can see, though, those Tesellas pose 0 threat and 0 problem to us at all. There was a blue cloud here, which I can fly into if I really wanted to make them a bigger target, but quite frankly, that's going to make me a bigger target to them and probably increase the incoming damage. Since we are essentially signature tanking this, I kind of want to stay out of that blue cloud for the most part. I'm also just going to say again at this point in the video, I still adore all of the new missile graphics that they put into Viridian. The way that these EMP missiles, these Mjolnir missiles look now when they hit a target, that sort of coruscating electricity. It just looks so cool, you know. Maybe other people are just like, you know, really, Benzie, it's just a missile effect. I love it. I think that is absolutely stunning. Anyway, that is our first one of these done. Let's now go through to the Origin conduit, and we'll run a second one. Calm, Dark, Abyssal, Dead Space, and second run, I guess this would be. So again, this time we've got a Striking Leshak, and this is a bit of a scarier ship. It doesn't have much in the way of hit points, but it does have a lot of damage that it can put out if it can hit you. So checking its damage profiles here, I might go Nova. It's kind of a decent split depending on where you want to go. I'm going to start with Inferno just to get through things. If you look at the Striking Leshak, it's only on its hull actually, so it's whichever one has the lowest hull resistance is what you really should be going for. These are quite fast moving ships as well. They will try and pull range from you as you get close, so I do really want to take out that biocompetitive cache as quickly as possible, loot it and start spiraling in on that Drekavac. Now, in certain cases, you need to be very careful doing what I'm about to do. I am literally just going to orbit the Leshak at 1 kilometer, which means I'm going to fly in a straight line directly towards it. Remember, Triglavian weapons ramp up their damage over time as long as they're targeting you. So even though it's missing me at the moment, its damage is ramping up. This means that if it does score a hit, the longer this fight has been going, the more damage that hit can potentially do. I'm also firing my rockets despite being well and truly out of range of this ship, but there we go. I normally wouldn't fly in a straight line at a target like this, but ultimately we are small enough that we can get away with it here in the Jaguar. And you'll see that that Leshak has managed to pull us right to the edge of the arena. We really want to kill this now nice and quickly so that it doesn't pull right to the edge and actually takes me out of the arena to take damage. Now, that direct approach does not work if there is a blue cloud between you and your target. You will just get yourself blown up, so do be aware of that. Yeah, steer clear of blue clouds, basically, when you're running a frigate in this kind of environment. Anyway, there we go. The Striking Leshak is down. You can see we're still right on the edge of the arena. Look at that battleship breakup. Love how the Leshak looks when it explodes. Beautiful explosion. Why do you play EVE Online, Benzie? Because I adore the way the ships look when they explode. So at this point as well, I realise I haven't actually looted the biocompetitive cache. I kind of flew past it. I obviously didn't click loot all in time. Yes, you can default keybind to enter. I sometimes find that that actually ends up putting me into chat though, so I do have to be careful. But here we are, we're just going to approach that. We are going to loot all as we go past. Nice. And then through the transfer conduit into the second room of this Abyssal Dead Space. Gotta say as well, I do just adore how Abyssal Dead Spaces look. The way that they've got these crumbled rocks here with those sort of Triglavian nodes all over them, the purples, the different skyboxes, they are stunning rooms. It's honestly one of my favourite things about Abyssals, just how the environment itself looks. Coming now into the second room, here we have some Vila Damoviks. Okay, so a Vila Damovik is a drone ship. This is where you can actually have a lot of fun, because I'm looking here, there are some short-range deviant automators in here. If I were to orbit that, then any drones that these guys launch at me are just going to get chewed up by those. That said, they're not that much of a threat, and it would also, those deviant automata will damage the missiles that I'm launching, so they can't actually stop me launching missiles properly at a target. So what we're going to do here is essentially ignore the little drones, the Vila swarmers. They are not important to us here. I'm going to take out that biocompetitive loot cache, pop it, grab all of the loot nice and quickly, and then we're just going to take out each of those Damoviks. The fact that the Vilas all have these swarmers, these drones, it's really not as much of a threat as it first looks. You sit there and think, that's a lot of drones on the field. Also, when are we getting Vilas that we can pilot ourselves? Imagine Triglavians that are actually, full-on drone ships as well. Like you've got the Eurystus with missiles and drones. Wouldn't it be cool if there was like a proper Vila variant that you could fly as a capsuleer? Damoviks, not too much of an issue. They're a little bit fast. They can sometimes outrange your missiles like we were talking about earlier, so you may have to occasionally just approach them to get nice and close and stop them orbiting and just moving away from your missiles, because of that whole how missiles traverse through space. Again, if you've got the distance between you and a ship A to B is 10 kilometers. Your missiles are 10 kilometers. If they're moving away, then the moment you launch the ship, their current position is 10 kilometers away. The missile starts traveling. By time the missile arrives at that location, the ship has now moved 3 or 4 kilometers beyond it, therefore the missile's out of range. That's kind of what we often have going on with the Damavix. You'll see that there are a lot of times where, like now, I'm launching a ton of rockets, but the Vela is just taking no damage whatsoever. This is not a great situation to be in. When that happens, what you can do is just hit approach, or you can just pick a new direction to start flying off in, and then suddenly hit the orbit back. That change of your angles essentially can cause their orbit to spiral outwards into an ellipsis. Essentially, as you go from orbiting them and they orbiting you, you just double click into space and start flying in a straight line off in a direction. Their orbit then elongates and they suddenly come back towards you. When you turn around to start orbiting them again, you suddenly are flying straight at each other and you can find yourself very quickly inside the range. Anyway, there we go. With the Velas down, the Vela Damavix, you'll see the Vela Swarmers just deactivate. We don't need to worry about them. The room doesn't need the Swarmers killed in order to open the gate. They are basically just ammunition, so we can ignore those, move through the transfer conduit, and we are now coming into the third and final room of this second Dark Abyssal. There we are. They call it a dark, but look at how bright and gorgeous this room is. So we are straight needle to cellars again, no big issue. We're just going to go straight after that biocompetitive cache, and then we will take out these Tessellers. Again, it doesn't really matter which you go for, different types. I've got a lot of Inferno with me, so they tend to be the ones I default to if there's not much between it. But same old. Let's blow up that loot cache, or just bounce off the front of it. Loot it, grab everything we can. When the game wakes up, there we are, get back into range. Loot. And now we're going to start orbiting each of these Tessellers one by one. You can see I've actually taken quite a bit of damage there because of how I've stopped. How I sort of paused there for a second. I've also let my capacitor get nice and low. Basically, that's partly because of the orange cloud and partly because I've just been running the shield booster constantly without really thinking about capacitor. Not a huge issue. Not a huge issue. We can get through that just fine. Still taking a little bit more damage than perhaps the shield booster can keep up with. So again, we're just going to thin the crowd. Pointless panicking about that. Just kill some of the Tessellers and that's going to reduce the amount of incoming damage against us, which will therefore mean the shield booster can now keep up. And look at those thermal explosions. They just look so pretty. They just look so pretty. I love frigates with rockets and the way that they just blast off and shoot off out. Yes, I know. Rockets blasting off looks like Team Rocket's blasting off again. Yes, I made a Pokemon reference in the EVE Online video, sue me. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Strike needle to cell. As you can see, these guys are going down nice and easily. That is going to get us out of this final room, finishing off this calm, dark, abyssal dead space. Really, really easy. Yeah, there are some ships like the Charybdis and that I've not been able to showcase in this, but quite frankly, you fly exactly the same way you normally would. Get the as close as possible to the Charybdis, hammer it through its weakest points, and you'll be fine. Same with like the Hunters and stuff like that, and the Knights. You've just got to know how to fly against those. Anyway, folks, that's everything for today's video. I fly the Jaguar like this in C1, C2, and C3 anomalies as well if it's a Wolf IA and C13s. Let me know how you get on with this. If you've got a fit that you think is slightly better or you've got questions about this, do ask in the comment section down below. Otherwise, thank you for watching this one right the way through to the end. If you do give it a try, good luck. Otherwise, happy sailing and see you in New Eden.